Well, this is for my next little Tuesday tip, English paper piecing. And now you go, well, Ira wasn't a quilter and not a hand sewer either. Well, I was going into a cruise and I figured I had 5 days on sea. I needed to have something to do during that cruise. So I needed a hand sewing project, something that took long time to do and not so much space. So I decided to try English paper piecing. Never ever done it before. And this was my first kind of test to see before I even got my materials together for the quilt. So just some scraps, the really traditional little pattern, and make kind of look picture in this picture to be large. But when I put it on the table beside the ruler, let me get it focused up. See, those little pieces are just a little bit more than half an inch, maybe 5/8 of an inch in size. Yes, this was a very tiny project, so I kind of started small, and then I thought, well, maybe I could do that during this trip. So I had started, and here is a part of it. When I say part of it, this is maybe less than a half. It's going to be eventually a queen size quilt. These pieces are obviously quite a bit larger. No, I did not use these 5/8 of an inch pieces for that one. But I still had to use some technology. So this is my tip. How do I cut all these pieces of paper patterns? Because the English paper piecing, what you do, you paste it over a piece of cardstock or paper or templates, and then you hand sew these pieces together. So this is just some of the leftover pieces I had. I had thrown a whole bunch of them away already after I used them. But this was my little travel box that I had. I cut a whole lot of those pieces. Well, how did I cut those ones? With the scan and cut, of course. So I will show you how I did that one. But just kind of before, here's some of the other tools you need. So, there are a couple ways that you can do, like most of the sewing. You could glue them together, or you could hand paste them like I did. I tried both ways. Again, I kind of like the hand pasting, so I took some of the ugly color threads that I don't normally use those ones for hand pasting. And then for the stitching, again, multiple ways. I actually used 100 weight silk thread. So this is maybe my 4th or 5th spool on that one going. There's only 100 meters on each of these ones. Other important tools that I found was, of course, we need to have hand sewing needles. And my first stack of needles I bent and broke and lost already, so I need to get some more. The needles that I have currently on this little container, these ones are the straw needles. So they're another thin, small needles, but the problem is they also have a very small eye. So here is the best needle threader ever, in my opinion. It is just an amazing. I could use this needle threader to thread those tiny needles, and I'll try to demo that one when I get my other hand free. And of course, then you would need some snips and scissors also. And then other one I used was the Thread Haven. This was just a thread conditioner, and I run it through so the thread doesn't tangle up as easy. So that was another one of my products. So they all neatly fitted onto my little box that I carried on the deck and in a cruise ship, and then I was able to show. Yes, I got lots of questions, people asking, what are you doing? And when I saw these little pieces, I said it's going to be a quilt. They gave me a really weird look, like, yeah, good luck. Well, anyway, so I've been working on it for a few years now. And during this isolation, the quarantine, I've been working on it a little bit more. So I have only a few more long seams to go to finish it up. But let me go and set it up on my scan and cut. And I show where I got this pattern and how I got those pieces out. Okay, I'm at my scan and cut. And any scan and cut model, we have several quilt blocks built in. So I go to the pattern, and then these are some of the major groups of the patterns. The next page, there's a group of quilt patterns. And there's 7 major groups on my machine. I will touch the last one, because this one had kind of the shapes that I wanted to do. I could use some of those others, so even making your ordinary hexagonal one. But if I went to the next page, I like this little look like a bit of a flower. So that's the one I used. These ones come with the default size and all other ones, but these are all rescalable. So great way to cut any quilt block the templates as using this, because that way all my pieces gets perfectly scaled. I made mine to be about 5 inches on the narrowest part, so that'll be the width. So I'm just gonna hold down that minus button until I have my width to be 5 inches. This is not totally symmetrical in a ways that it is taller than the wider. So I don't worry about the top. I just want to have this to be 5. The top will be then automatically calculated. And then I just touch OK. So it shows that this block consists of 3 different pieces. So if I select the first one, it shows that that's that pieces that go outside. That's the center piece. And then that one would be those little flower petals. So let me pick the first one. And it tells that I would need 6. Well, 6 is for the one block. Well, I was gonna make a whole lot of blocks. I can't even remember how many I made. There are, I think, hundreds and hundreds now. So I wanted to just to kind of do first one. And then I'll multiply it. Well, when it came out on my screen, it has a seam allowance built in. Because all of these quilt blocks, they already have as a default a seam allowance. So it's also a great way that I could just cut all my quilt pieces with the scan and cut too. I actually just cut strips of fabric and use my rotary cutter. It was a bit faster that way, but absolutely you could just cut this with the scan and cut. You want to then stabilize your fabric and use the fabric support sheet when you cut these ones, the fabric pieces. So on this one, the inner line is currently on this block would be a drawing line. So it would not, the machine would not cut it. But if you put the fabric marking pen on the machine, it would draw your seam allowance. That way, if you want to use these quilt blocks to sew them with the sewing machine, those blocks would be already, the seam stitching line will be marked. Well, I really didn't want for these templates to have the seam allowance. I only wanted that inner piece. So we can edit this one. So I'm going to go to edit, and then on my machine I have to say object edit. Well, there is a button on this one that shows seam allowance. And as a default was 1/4 inch. I can change it, some of the different seam allowances if needed, or smaller or larger. But I don't want any, so I will turn it off. So now all I have is just that piece that I will be cutting out of a paper. And now I need to have more than just one, because one of those flower ones takes 6, and I have many on those ones on mine. So I will just then put multiple amounts. So I'm just going to go and just to put a big number, and that's okay. Well, they're sort of on top of each other. I could move them one by one. Or what I can do is, let me just close these windows. I could have these ones to be automatically the machine to kind of stagger them on my piece of paper. But first I'm gonna go on to my settings, and on the settings the pattern interval says 1. When it is 1, it will put those pieces right next to each other. Well, I want to have a little gap between them so that my knife wouldn't catch onto the corner of the previous piece when it was cut. So I will put this one to 2. Especially if you cut out of the fabric pieces and you use this automatically kind of arranging patterns on, then you may want to leave that little gap. So we can adjust that pattern interval. So now I'm going to touch this button that looks like a little pieces. And I can have my machine to automatically arrange them on to save space. I can have it go as random as possible, or then keep in the certain shape. I want it to just optimize the space as much as I can, so I touch that one. And here they are. They kind of spread them out on my mat, and I could have even had more. So that way I can cut the whole 12 by 12 sheet of paper. Well, what did I use for paper? I used a couple different things. One of the ones, let me put this one. The ones that what I used, I had kind of a ugly scrapbook papers, and this was just some of those scrapbook papers that I have. So they were some of the ones that I knew I'd never use them. They were a little bit heavier than just your printer paper, so they worked really good. And they are nicely, they are 12 by 12 pieces, so that way I was able to just put the sheet on and cut the whole sheet at one time. The other one For some reason, I had gotten some of these old calendars. Well, I had these calendars and got old, but they were quilt patterns, and I just like haven't been able to throw them out. But there were some that I wasn't that keen on. I don't know why I was keeping them, but they were just pretty pictures. But there were some I didn't really like so much, so I used some of those ones because again, it was a nice shape of a paper, and it also the nice weight on it. So that is like one that I had used a piece from that packet. So really any kind of a little bit sturdier paper. This has worked great because they were the size for my cutting mat. Well, after I created the patterns, I saved those ones in my machine. And if I go on my saved patterns, so here's a whole sheet of those little side pieces that I showed, and here is a little bit of a sheet of all the different flower petals. And then there's one that I combined some of things a little bit together because I didn't need that many centerpieces. I needed most of the flower petals, and then I needed quite many of these little side pieces, but not so many centers. So I had just created a few different patterns that I kept using when I was cutting my shapes. Let me show how to use this cool needle threader. So I have taken one of these small straw needles, well, small eye also. I know that there's an eye, I'm not sure I see it very well. And I'll use black silk thread this time, so it will show a little bit better in the camera than the white that I was using. This one is the sew line. They come on 2 sizes, so I had to kind of look what size of needles you're using so that you get the proper size. And then I'll just pull this little protective cover out. In the end, there's a hole, and I will put the eye of the needle, that end, to this hole all the way in. Then I will take the thread tail. Here we go, and that thread tail, oops, it just kind of goes wrong way. I'm gonna lay it on that little slit. You see, there's a kind of little slit. Let me just show again. So all it is that thread just goes just over that one, and on the top there is a little pink pattern, so I will push that one down and pull it through, and here it is, my needle threaded, and I was not sure there was an eye on it, but I guess there was. Well, then after I got it threaded, I will just use my snips to cut it, and then I'm using that thread haven. It's a little thread conditioner. And you see, I've been using it quite a bit. I would just lay my thread on it, run it through, and then I was run it through a couple times. So it just kind of gives coating on it that makes it easier to sew and doesn't make it tangle so easy. So that was my little tip for today.